Welcome to the Immigrant Entrepreneurs Show, where our mission is to inspire, impact, and influence other immigrant entrepreneurs to follow their dream and create the future they want. My guest today is Alex Brueckmann. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. It's nice to be here.
Alex, let me give our audience a quick background info about you. You used to be a musician or music journalist, and then you
Say the latter, yeah.
Okay.
The music
Then you
journalist.
decided to get out of it, and you studied general management in Germany, Uruguay, France, and then last but not least at Harvard Business School in the United States. Tell us more about your story, your background, and how you ended up where you are.
So those countries that you just mentioned, other than Germany, I didn't really live there for a long time, right? So I lived there during a semester abroad in Uruguay. And that was kind of the first time when I kind of allowed myself to be away from home for a longer period, like those few months. And that was kind of hard for me, to be very honest, because I didn't really speak the language to the degree where I felt comfortable, but I did not run away. I decided I will do this, and I stuck with it, and it was one of the best decisions of my life. It's kind of one of those moments in life when you realize when you stick to something really hard, all of a sudden everything that comes afterwards doesn't seem so hard anymore. So all the things that used to be a bit difficult for you, you're like, yeah, whatever. I made it through that part, so the other things don't seem too heavy anymore. And that kind of became a theme in my life. So I studied general management, went back into the media industry after that, and was thrown into a subject that I wasn't really a fan of, like business strategy. I was always, during my studies, I was always focused more on the marketing side of things, and I wanted to go into automotive marketing. That was kind of my dream. So all of my internships during my studies and everything was geared toward automotive industry. But then, when you finish your studies in 2008 and you remember what happened in 2008, this was the start of the financial crisis back then. It was literally impossible to get a hold in the automotive industry at that stage. So I had to just go with something that was the next best option for me. And I ended up getting an opportunity to work on business strategy, which was then becoming the big love of my life, if you want. Like, this is the topic that I grew into, that I really loved. And that topic then kind of brought me more and more outside of Germany. Like the work that I did and the consulting work that I did, and also the executive development work that I started doing in around 2013 was giving me an opportunity to engage more and more with people across the world. And I kind of fell in love with that idea to have a bigger reach, a bigger impact, a bigger footprint in what I do. And many, many years later, I then met a girl who had a Canadian, half German, half Canadian. And as it always goes, at some point you need to make a decision. Where do you want to live when you have those two cultures in you? And she was very upfront with me very early when we met and declared her wish to move back to Canada. At that stage, I was leading a company, so it's not that easy to just, drop the pen and leave. But we made it work. And with, again, timing is everything, right? Just like in 2008, it was the worst possible timing. We moved from Germany to Canada in March 2020, at the height of the first COVID lockdown, with an 8-week-old child. So it was a lot of fear around us, like, is this the right thing to do? Should we really put our family through this stress? How resilient is our baby when it comes to all this? And yeah, it was probably the best decision of our lives to make that jump over the pond, regardless of the circumstances. And we've been building our life ever since here in the Pacific West and the Lower Mainland around Vancouver, Canada.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much. Of course, I have tons of questions for you. But
Go
before
ahead.
we get into everything else, I have one major thing that I would like to get your opinion on. So, you said when we experience something hard, everything that comes after it, and to just stick to it, everything that comes after it seems to be easy, or it is going to be easy. Now, when do you think does it make sense to stick to something hard, and when do we know that okay, that's not the right thing, whatever it is, and we need to pivot? How does someone know that, or how does someone find out?
I think what I found out for me is when I was younger, I didn't have the stamina. So
Mm-hmm.
what I mean with that, there were multiple opportunities for me where in my life where I could take a decision. Do I want to quit or do I want to stay? And in hindsight, when I was in my, let's say, mid-20s, I realized that there were several opportunities where I simply quit too early. I was
Mm-hmm.
never someone who regretted those decisions, but I asked myself, what could have been on the other side of sticking? So I tried in smaller situations where I was like, no, I don't want that. And I said, wait a minute, just experiment with it. Try and stick with it and see what comes out of it. And I think that became a bit of a guiding principle for me. But to answer your question precisely, there are also situations where I know I need to quit, where I walk away from something. And I always ask myself, what is the worst possible thing that could happen if I stick? And if
Mm-hmm.
the answer is, for example, I would damage my mental health, I would endanger my family or my financial future, for example, like
Mm-hmm.
if you're responsible for a family, those things matter, then I would probably walk away from something. But if the answer is, well, it might be just a sleepless night, or it might be something that in hindsight you would look back at and you would say, that was worth it, then I stick with it. And especially when you're an entrepreneur, sticking with it differentiates you from the 99.9% who don't. If you take a look at those ultra successful entrepreneurs, what made them ultra successful is simply they stuck around longer than everyone else. They had a
That's right.
dream, they had an idea, and they made it work against all odds. And I think that is something that I had to learn, I would say in my late 20s when I embraced that idea, but I really only found out what it means when I started to think about becoming a father and then moving to a different country. Like, there are just things that you have no idea what you run into. I mean, everyone who's a parent out there will definitely know what I'm talking about, and also everyone who's an entrepreneur will know what I'm talking about. You
Mm-hmm.
can think things through as much as you want. The real proof is in the pudding, as they say. Once you start going, you will run into barriers or roadblocks that you simply couldn't have predicted. And then the question is, do you find a way around these roadblocks, or do you just run into them time and again, and at some point do you give up?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Speaking, you said earlier, you said moving to Canada was the best or one of the best decisions in your life you've ever made. What makes it be the best decisions?
We were pretty conscious about where we want to raise our child. And once you've seen different cultures and how they react to children, how they support
Mm,
families, just simply how they allow you to be who you are, it is very hard to go back to places that are less supportive. And the German culture, if you want to call that, is very rigorous compared to other countries, to other cultures. And what blew me away when I came to Canada for the first time, I mean, it's kind of like, everyone says that Canadians are so nice. And
mm,
everywhere you go in the world, when people hear you live in Canada, the first thing that they associate with it is how nice the people are. Well, there is a reason why the people are the way they are. And one of the biggest reasons is Canada never fought a big war on their own soil. Like there is no deep-rooted generational trauma in this country as it would be like if you compare it to any European country that has gone through major wars. Especially Germany has gone through 2 major wars, self-inflicted, and these deeply rooted cultural scars, they are being passed from generation to generation. For example, my grandparents, my grandfather especially, he was a child soldier in the Second World War. The pain that he has suffered as a young adult, not even an adolescent, you cannot get this out of your system. And there are things that happen after that, how you raise your children, how you influence your grandchildren, this history that's in you and how you were raised. And it's just the things that you tell yourself and then tell your kids and tell your grandchildren. Things like, a German boy doesn't know pain. Like those stupid sentences that basically shut you down as a young kid when you cry. Instead of sitting with you in your pain, you hear a sentence like that, and that shapes you, and that shapes the next generation. And we have a lot of that in Europe. We have a lot of that, especially in Germany, with that violent history. And it is something that I did not want my son to grow up in. And on the other side of the pond, there was this country called Canada, where you have many, many immigrants from all around the world. The country has more than doubled its population in the last 40 years. We are still only 40 million people here. So it is a small population in a massive country where people just allow you to be who you are. I mean, we celebrate holidays with people from all over the world. When there's Holi, we celebrate Holi. And I have no connection to the Indian culture, for example. Like when there are holidays of the indigenous people here, we are aware of that and we are happy for them. When our friends just look around us, like where we live. My left door neighbor is from China. My right door neighbor is from Singapore. My back door neighbor is from Ukraine. Like we are people from all over the world, and everyone allows everyone just to be who they are and express their beliefs, celebrate their holidays. And this is something that deeply impacted me and just impressed me. And I am someone who just loves to let other people be who they are, but I also want to be respected and be who I am. And this country gives me the opportunity to do that and to live by that rule. And it is so impressive to see my son grow up in such a diverse environment where people are liberal in the best sense of the word, which simply means I allow you to do what you want to do and I allow you to be who you want to be. And that is something that I can only recommend everyone to test. As they say, for me, it started when I started to travel. And as they say, travel is deadly for your prejudices. And it was something that deeply influenced me and something that I enjoy every day.
When it comes to, obviously, you have experienced both worlds or both sides of the pond. When it comes to entrepreneurship, would you say, I mean, that's very generalizing, but would you say there exist more opportunities in Canada versus Germany?
There are a lot of voices in Germany that ask for deregulation and less bureaucratic hurdles for entrepreneurs. I see where these people come from. I can understand where they come from. But entrepreneurship for me is exactly that. Despite the rules, despite the regulations, despite what the country where you live offers you, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you are an entrepreneur. That's something that you don't decide based on the regulatory environment. That's something that you are. And if you aren't an entrepreneur, you will never be an entrepreneur, regardless of how little barriers there are. Now, this is also generalizing. I realize that. Especially some industries, they need a certain regulatory environment to really blossom. And I get that. I was an entrepreneur in Europe, in Germany mainly. I was an entrepreneur in Canada. I see just different hurdles. I would not say that Canada is a better place to be an entrepreneur than Germany, for example. It is just different. There are different hurdles, and other hurdles that you would have in one country, you don't have in another one. I wouldn't say it is easier or more difficult. It's just different. And if you accept the rules and regulations as they are, there are just things you can influence, there are things you can control, and others you simply can't. So it is about where you put your focus. If you want to complain about something, you will always find a reason to complain. If you want to make something work, you will find or try to find ways until you can't find any more ways. And only then you could ask, or you could say things like, I tried everything I could, everything in my power, and it still didn't work. And then you might be able to also point to the outside world. Yes, fine. But until you get to that point, you would try and make it work. And I do that every day. This is like, it's just a constant thing that you deal with, and you learn. Every immigrant knows that you kind of need to relearn how to live, because the rules in the country are different. Even though the people might look similar to you, the rules in the country look different. Health insurance is different. Everything is different. And that's, I think, is easier for people who have an entrepreneurial mindset, because they just make it work, versus people who don't.
When you came to Canada, because most people, entrepreneurs, people is again general, but entrepreneurs say, hey, when you go somewhere, when you immigrate somewhere, you should burn the bridges to whatever is behind you in order to be fully all in on what's the new place that you're living. What was that like for you?
I think there is a lot of truth to that. Burning the bridges to the past helps you focus on the present and helps you build your future. Now, obviously, my entire family is in Germany. I do not burn bridges to the past. But I do have maybe time zone differences can actually be helpful. Like, I live on the West Coast, which is a 9-hour time zone difference to Central Europe, which basically means when I get up, they end their day. So there is not a lot of opportunity, simply from that perspective, to keep those bridges active and walk across those bridges every day. I don't travel to Germany very often. So while I hold my family and friends dear in my heart, I do not have the opportunity to speak to them every day. And it's probably weird to say, and maybe some people can't relate to that, which is fine. But I do not miss Germany. I do not miss my family. I hold them very close. I sometimes miss talking to them. But there is a difference between giving in to being homesick and missing someone to the degree that it hurts. And on the other side of that, being grateful for what you have and being thankful for the family that raised you and the friends that you have. Friendship and family endures, and it's nothing that just goes away if you move to a different country. So of course I miss them, but that only means that I think about them more often than maybe other people think about their friends and family. And when I spend time with them, I enjoy it as if it might be the last time, because you really never know.
That's right.
That allows me to then also be very present and be in the moment.
And I feel, speaking to you and our conversation, I feel you're someone who, even when I ask you questions, you take a few seconds to think about it and then answer. I feel you being really in the moment. You're really present, even if you're not, or we're not next to each other physically. But I totally feel that. How was it always like that, or how did you get into into that place?
I think I'm probably I needed to learn that. Let me put it that.
Okay.
I'm constantly working on myself. I'm constantly constantly trying to become a better parent. And this life that I'm living just requires me to think and to pause, simply because I'm operating in a foreign language, for example. While after a few years in a country, obviously the language is not a barrier anymore, there are still moments where I'm like, did I just capture that correctly? What was that word? I don't think I understood that entirely.
Right.
So sometimes it's just self-preservation in the end, to be able to pause and think before you respond and act. Because sometimes, like in the past, I didn't do that. And I kind of made some really severe mistakes because of that. And those severe mistakes have nothing to do with wrong business decisions or anything. It has more to do with how I showed up and how I reacted to people, and what therefore the damage was that I inflicted on the relationship, because I didn't allow myself to be present enough, because I didn't allow myself to pause and think what is the appropriate response to something that just happened. I think, I was never more present and mindful than I am now. And in 10 years from now, I will look back at today and will be like, you weren't present and mindful at all, my friend. It's just a constant development that happens.
So when you said you reacted to situations or circumstances that turned out, for in relation to business, not be the best decisions you have made, I wonder what caused that impulsive, let's call it impulsive reaction, or reacting without thinking. What was the cause of that? I'm interested to know more about that.
I mean, every time you make a snap decision, every time you're hot-headed, every time you are impulsive, it is literally your ego that kicks in. It is your ego that feels hurt or that tries to protect you from something, if you want to phrase it positively. But in the end, it is not being in tune with who you are and letting outside circumstances hijack you. And that is obviously just not the most healthy way to go through life. It is way healthier, I found, to not let others control you. Like, if you let your ego drive yourself, it basically means you give a remote control to other people, and they control your reactions, they control your feelings. It is probably the biggest life challenge to wrestle with almost on a daily basis, because I used to be very emotionally driven, let my ego kick in way too often. And that has damaged relationships in the past. It has damaged business opportunities and relationships in the past. And overcoming that impulse is something I deal with every day, especially when it comes to being the way I was being raised and the way I raised my son. Those are just different philosophies of how you want to raise children. And my girlfriend is, she's a different generation. She's 9 years younger than me. I'm a Gen X, she's a millennial. And we simply have grown up differently and have partly different philosophies and approaches to how we want to raise our son, which is fine. But I do see the value in her ways. So I try to get rid of some of the unhelpful behaviors and limiting beliefs that I have picked up during my life, who are simply ego-driven. Like, my way is the right way, right? My way or the highway. And that's just not who I want to be with my son. So getting your own ego in check is not only helpful in business, it is definitely helpful as an entrepreneur and as a parent. So it's something that I needed to learn, and something that I'm still learning every day.
I can so much relate to that, man. You're speaking to my heart. I can relate to being a father, and also I can relate to being an entrepreneur. In both cases, when I react impulsively, I understand, or then I give you an example. In business, sometimes things, or oftentimes things don't work out immediately. And then reacting impulsively, going, oh, it didn't work, let's go this, let's do that. It takes so much energy. It takes so much focus away, and it's just like you're moving from one thing to another to another to another, which obviously is not going to be the right strategy, because if you don't give it enough time and you're not being patient with it, nothing is going to work out, right? Or at least in my case, I don't know, maybe others experience it differently. And also in fatherhood, when I'm reacting, and I'm no master at this yet, maybe I will be at some point. But when I'm reacting specifically with my son impulsively, then I also see him mirroring me, right? And basically doing the same things in a different context with me or with other people. And I'm like, I don't want him to be like that. Then I go back, reflect on what I do, and correct myself and course correct, and realize, okay, what I'm doing is having this outcome, is having basically this delayed gratification on him, that I need to be more self-conscious about how I do things.
Isn't it funny that we always think about parents as teachers for their kids and helping them grow, when in
Mm,
reality, it's our children that help us develop and grow, and they teach us, like, at least in my case, my son teaches me some of the most important life lessons.
100%. 100%. All right. I would like to know what Alex does as an entrepreneur. But before you tell us, I also wonder how you got into the whole thing. I know there is something related to automotive, probably, that you were excited about. And yeah, tell us how everything happened and what you do today.
Well, what I am today is not what I started with. So I am a management consultant focused on business strategy. So what I do is I help medium-sized to large organizations redefine their business strategy and connect their executive development to that. I used to do this type of work in a different setting, in a different context. But when you move countries and you leave
Mm-hmm.
your previous business, you have an opportunity to redefine what you do. And my main focus used to be, when I was still running a company in Europe, was leadership training in the broadest sense of the word, but typically related to leadership capabilities that you need to build as an organization to help leaders implement strategy more successfully. My personal focus was always on the strategy piece, more than it was on the leadership training piece. But as a company, we were focused on both sides to a certain degree, with a massively much bigger part on the leadership development piece than on the strategy piece. But my background, as I said earlier, was in strategy, or became strategy. So for the past, I would say, almost 20 years, that has been my passion. And when I moved to Canada, I realized I had an opportunity to build a business fully based on that, and less on the leadership training, at least the mass training. So at some point, you make that decision and you realize this is going to be a tough road ahead. Because how do you differentiate yourself in a market where everyone can call themselves a consultant, everyone can call themselves a coach? And I think what you said earlier then plays an important role. Obviously, you can walk away from something that becomes hard and try something else. But this pivoting, as people often call it, is what I think prevents you from stacking up your wins over time and really carving out a very profitable niche for yourself. When you realize that you stuck with something for a long time, you've been honing, without realizing, you've been honing your craft, and you're doing things better and better and better, and you find new ways of doing things that you otherwise would never have discovered. And at some point, things just make sense. When you speak about something, it just makes sense. You're so deeply grounded in what you do. And the people around you will realize that. The people around you will realize that you speak from deep, deep experience and knowledge. And that is when you become an authority in your field, and that is when success comes. But that takes a decade, at least. And also related to the conversation we had earlier about ego, you need to allow your ego to just step aside and to be humble enough to learn and grow and learn and grow. And today, I mean, if I take a look back over the past few years, when I started to write books about what I do and help people understand how they can use the approaches that I've been using over 15 years in their own businesses, that's when a deep sense of satisfaction comes. At least it came to me, to my work. I make enough money, I make enough that I can support my family, and that's literally everything that I want. I'm not in it to become rich and famous. The funny thing is, the less you try to become rich and famous, the more people gravitate toward you. And that is something that I never would have expected. It's deeply satisfying to see, like if you receive an email from someone you have never talked to and they've read your book and then they tried some of those things in their own business and they're like, man, this really works. I'm like, yeah, it does. It does work for you. Awesome. Congratulations for being bold enough to try something new. And if it then even works, how cool is that? And when you receive emails like that, it's just so deeply satisfying. I just love what I do. I write, I teach, I consult, and everything is based on the frameworks and processes that I developed over time to help companies build better strategy.
I love that. But when you moved to Canada, you were basically starting from zero, I assume. Is that
I
correct?
started from experience.
Okay,
And
that's
that is
awesome.
very different than thinking about, like, of course, I had to build the company from scratch. I had
right.
no assistant. I became a solopreneur again. Where in Germany, you would have your office, you have your back office team, you have your employees, and you have your network. Of course, that was very different here in Canada. Most of my business connections, I would say at that stage, 80% of that were in Europe, not in North America. So in that regard, you kind of start from zero, but you really don't. You start from experience. It's not your first business. You're not new in the industry, and your knowledge is valid. Your experience is valid. It is just a different way of selling. It is a different way of marketing. If you run a personal brand business, which is what I do, as compared to what I did earlier in Europe, there are kind of different rules, and you need to be open and you need to learn these rules. But in the end, at a certain stage, you never start again from zero. You start from experience.
That's very true. That's a great way to put it. So, but how do you get your foot in the door? How do you start getting your first clients or consulting clients when you're somewhere new? Most likely no one has ever heard about it. As you said yourself, there is ocean, almost an ocean of other consulting and coaches and trainers. How do you get your first few clients?
Because you start from experience, you also have a certain client network already. And that client network can be very helpful for you. Either they can open new doors for you, or maybe they even become clients of yours. Now, in my case, I realized relatively early that the network that I had could be helpful, but it would not pay the bills. So I started to build a new network long before I even decided to move to Canada. When I was in Canada the first time on vacation, before I came here, I just was curious. I wanted to figure out, how does this industry that I'm in Europe, how does that industry look like in Canada? And I reached out to several people in the Vancouver area in that industry, and I just had coffee with them. I just said, hey, I do this and that. You basically do the same thing. Do you have half an hour? Do you have an hour for a coffee? I'm on vacation in Vancouver. I would love to get to know you and exchange how things are going and how your industry works. Can you teach me how that industry works here? And that was way before I even had talked with my girlfriend about really moving here. That was probably 4 years before we really decided to move. I would never have thought that those connections that I had built at that stage would be critical for that first few years in the country. So when I then decided to move to Canada, I connected back with these people and said, hey, you know what? You wouldn't believe it. I actually moved to Vancouver. I bring my family over here. And some of these relationships helped me establish my name and establish a footprint as a family here, which I will be forever grateful for. And some of the things that I think every entrepreneur should understand is that the best way to sell is not to sell. The best way to sell is to produce value for people. And then they come into your world because they find your value wherever that is, whether it's on social media or whether they listen to you in a podcast, or whether it's that they read an article of yours. So I try to produce content that people find valuable, no matter where they're at in their growth journey. And it is content that is always around becoming a better leader. It is about becoming a person that helps others develop and grow. And to do that, you need to be very clear on business strategy. You need to be very clear on how you want to lead. And those are the things that I help people do. And if they come into my world because they consumed a piece of content that I put out there and help them just, get for free, chances are they want to know more. And then they potentially check out your website. They see that you wrote books. They start reading your books. And that goes back to what we discussed earlier. It just takes time. And you need to allow yourself that time. Obviously, if you want to push your services down people's throat, you can also do that. It's probably on the one side a quicker win, but you also have a much higher burn rate, and people don't necessarily enjoy working with you. So I decided to go the other way and do sales through content marketing and through networking. And those two approaches have proven to be long-term the best options for me personally.
I would say it's also a little bit personal, or at least in what I believe it to be. It's personality related. If somebody is like, and I don't mean to judge anyone, but if someone comes across or is more like, I don't want to call it aggressive, but maybe offensive, not in a negative way, who likes to be confident, maybe, yeah. Who likes to be, again, all the words that come to mind are not very positive, but someone who likes to put himself out there all the time and likes to work or make things happen very fast and likes to see immediate results, then that might not be the right strategy for them, right? Because what you're describing here, I imagine it to be, as you said, it takes patience. Sometimes it takes decades. You have to be patient. You have to do something. And at the same time, I also believe that if you're doing it this way or your way, is something that you deeply, deeply have to believe in. If you don't believe it, you're not going to be patient for a decade,
Yes, very true.
If you don't have high confidence and certainty in yourself, you're not going to stick to it for a decade, right?
You know what the hardest part about that is? Especially at the beginning, no one is confident in you. No outside person believes in you because they don't know you. They cannot believe in you. They cannot be confident in you. So it's those first 5 to 10 years where you need to be your biggest cheerleader because you are the only one who can believe in yourself. And if you allow yourself those 10 years, I promise you there will be something really, really good on the other side of that. It's because most people don't allow themselves those 10 years. That they at some point will look back at their life and say, if I only had, I never wanted to become that person. I don't want to look back at my life and be like, if I only had. That's why I give it my all. And at some point you realize simply every time you work with a client and they tell you how different that was from everything they've experienced before and how valuable it was, at some point you have that feedback, and that's what fuels your fire. And for me, every time I run a strategy workshop with an executive team and they come to me afterwards and say, you know what, we weren't 100% sure whether your approach would fit to us, but this was probably the best thing that could have happened for us as a team. And also from a strategy perspective, this was an approach that we never went for, and it helps. It really, really works for us. So I know that I'm onto something, and that is something that I'm going to pursue, probably for as long as I work.
That's awesome, man. I also believe that it's so much related, especially in the beginning when you're not seeing immediate results and you're pushing through doing the work. I so much believe it's related to the self-image that you have of yourself, you know, because if you're seeing yourself as someone who is not worthy of getting these results, and or even not worthy and capable of doing the work that you need to do, then guess what, you will give up and you will pivot and you will jump to the next opportunity, and then the same thing happens. So yeah, man, I truly enjoyed this conversation. We are at 41 minutes. It went by like this. I want to be respectful of your time. But before I let you go, please tell us where people can find you and also the books that you have written. Please feel free to mention that.
Just Google my name. You will, you will get a few hits, whether it's my articles in Forbes, whether it's the books on Amazon or anywhere else, whether it's blog articles that I write. Just Google my name and you will find multiple content pieces. If you go on my website, it's just my surname.ca, brueckmann.ca. There's tons of free content there for you they will just help you get to understand my world and my thinking and how I approach leadership and strategy.
Thank you. We will definitely link you up in the show notes so people can find you. And yeah, man, it was such a interesting and inspiring conversation, and most importantly, also on a personal level. So I have to get this out to you. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you
Me
so
too.
much for taking the time and coming on the show, Alex.
Thank you for asking those really probing and deep questions. I really appreciated the conversation.
Thank you.